You know, it's one of the gaps in my training as a scientist that I'm finding myself in this sort of social situation as a science communicator where I'm dealing with this odd cadence of people insisting that something that is false is true and something that is true is false. And this is something that I, don't have the rhetorical training, and I'm trying to sort of get the chops to do this. This is actually going on in my life right now at this moment. The idea that the false is true, that, for example, NASA could be hiding something from you. Right now, we have the Dawn spacecraft. It actually went into orbit around the largest asteroid in our solar system, Ceres. This happened about 3 weeks ago. And it's amazing. I'm so excited. This is the first spacecraft. It uses an ion drive, and it's gone from one asteroid to another. Ceres is 600 miles across, and there actually may be evidence of liquid water somewhere underneath the surface of this asteroid. Now, as we were approaching Ceres, we took some beautiful images of Ceres, and there were these odd, bright areas inside some of the craters. And they were very bright, and we're wondering if they're just a lighter rock, or if we might have seen exposed ice, which is very exciting. And then all of a sudden, the images stopped coming. And the reason for that is because we're using an ion drive. The thrust is very, very small. It's the equivalent, the engine has the thrust equivalent of blowing on your hand. Just like that. Very, very low thrust engine. So we don't do a burn and start looping around in orbit around the asteroid. We have to sneak up into orbit. And for the last 2 weeks, we've been on the night side of the asteroid. That's why there haven't been any more pictures. And we are all waiting for 2 weeks from now when we swing around to the day side and we get some better images. But this morning, I'm answering emails about what are you hiding? What was in those craters that you're not willing to tell us about? And the explanation as to, no, it's orbital dynamics. This doesn't really seem to get people emotionally to respond to that. I want the month of my life back that 2012 apocalypse was, because I was getting calls from people who were frightened. And they were afraid the world really was coming to an end. And then there would be some people that would say, okay, I bet the world isn't coming to an end, but where can I go to see this wonderful astronomical conjunction happen? And the difficult thing to tell them was that there was nothing astronomically interesting happening on that date. This thing was whole cloth made up. And it's one of the reasons I actually stopped working with the History Channel. I was one of the regular hosts for the universe on the History Channel, but they would present a show that I was doing about asteroids or, possible life on Mars from a scientific perspective, and then they would have Ancient Aliens on right after it. Seriously, right after it. And they would be presenting these things as equivalent. And this was enough to make me stop actually working with the History Channel. The strange thing was, and I think this gets at a lot of what's going on with this denialism, is somebody called me at NASA and they said, oh my God, is it true the world is going to end next week? And I've been dealing with a lot of this, and I always try to be very polite, but I'd sort of had enough. And I said to them, think about this. Do you think I would be here in my office answering the phone if I thought the world was ending in a week? And I said, start getting worried when all of the scientists buy up expensive wine and max out their credit cards and all go to some tropical island, because then you know that something really bad is going to happen. But this idea that I am not a person, that I don't have feelings and emotions and a family and a reason to be alive, that I wouldn't react emotionally if I knew the world was coming to an end. What an odd disconnect. Somebody wants to separate the fact of being a scientist from the fact that you are a human being. And this is something that I've seen come over and over again. I was listening to the wonderful keynote address that Leonard was giving down there, and he was using the term, and he admits he didn't coin it, but I had heard it before, the weapons of mass distraction. That when there are things going on that are bad for consumerism, or people might say that they're bad for the economy, or any number of reasons, bad for the reactionary culture, for conservatism and culture, people often will try to distract you with something else. And this started to make me very uncomfortable, and I actually really enjoy working with the Discovery Channel, and I've talked to the Discovery Channel producers about this, that I'm beginning to have a bit of an ethical problem doing a show about the risk the Earth stands from a gamma ray burst, or the fact that an asteroid could destroy us, when there's an even greater risk present right now. And we are not talking about that on the Discovery Channel. We are not talking about the huge amount of data that makes human-driven climate change a fact. And, this is the sort of thing where, you know, if you ask me for an elevator speech, right? I mean, I'm in an elevator with you, I have you for 3 minutes. You know, why is it that you should believe climate change is real and that it's human driven? Very quickly, well, you know, what are some of the things that I think are the most compelling arguments? Well, NASA has 20 satellites that deliver climate change data. It's one of the reasons why we have to really protect our Earth science budget. These things are very important. Some of them are things like Landsat, which has been actually just giving data about land use and the health of vegetation and the entire land surface of the world for the last 43 years. We have a record of what things have changed in that time. And my friends are flying research aircraft over the ice caps of the world right now. They are wonderful. They're incredible young scientists, young women especially. And you know, we are measuring from orbit. One of our satellites I'm most proud of is called GRACE, the Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment. And you know of it, do you? Yeah. So the thing with GRACE is actually 2 spacecraft that fly about 100 miles apart from each other. And there is a microwave beam between the 2 of them. And they can measure the distance between the 2 spacecraft to tiny accuracies. It's actually about a 100th the diameter of a human hair. And as these 2 spacecraft fly over the Earth, they respond to the mass underneath them. And so when one of them is flying over a mountain range that's very massive, it actually gets accelerated a bit by the gravity. It dips down a bit, and that changes the distance between these 2 spacecraft. And so the spacecraft are up above us right now. They do a complete Earth image every 2 days, and they're doing this dance. And the reason we measure mass is that there are areas on the Earth where mass is changing very quickly. And one of the things we can measure are aquifers, the amount of water deep under the ground. From 300 miles up in space, we can actually measure the amount of water in aquifers hundreds of feet below the ground. And we see those aquifers draining. You know, and this is something that, you know, all of this data is not only free to everybody in America, it's free to everybody in the world. We want people to see these data. The other thing we're measuring are the health of the ice caps. And Greenland was in reasonable equilibrium 30 or 40 years ago. You know, the ice cap got a little bigger in the winter, a little smaller in the summer. There was a cycle. For the last 15 years, the ice cap on Greenland, which is a land-based ice cap, has lost 200 billion tons a year that has not been replaced. And if anything, that trend is accelerating. Antarctica, the ice sheets, the land-based ice sheets on Antarctica were stable until just a few years ago. And now there's the Western Antarctic ice sheet, which is losing about 200 billion tons a year. And now there's another ice sheet that we believe is actually beyond saving. You know, these ice sheets will melt, and that water will go into the ocean. And at this point, there really isn't any way to reverse that trend. You know, and I think that's something you can say. And, you know, people often ask me, are you allowed to say this as a NASA scientist? And the answer is absolutely yes, because these are the facts. What I'm not telling you about is policy. As a federal official, I cannot comment on what we should do, about whether we should do carbon cap and trade, about whether we should, you know, not use fossil fuels. That is not my right as a federal official. And I take that very seriously. You know, I serve the United States government and you, no matter what your political affiliation is. And I will give you the best information NASA has about what's going on with climate change. And it is not my place to argue about the politics of it. So, you know, the idea, the attack on what a scientist is, you know, are we not allowed to be human? You know, am I not allowed to go on television, which I have done, and say, I'm scared? You know, it's not that, you know, I'm going to tell you what to do, but I can tell you my emotional response. And it's become very apparent to NASA scientists that just delivering more and more data about, okay, well, we've got the acidification of the oceans. I can show you that the isotopic ratio of the carbon dioxide proves it's human activity that's doing this. I can tell you it's not the sun, because we've been studying the sun very closely for 30 years. So all of these data are not helping in the debate. And so instead, we're trying to draw back into our skills as storytellers and as people and as emotional human beings trying to tell this story. And I'll wrap up with one quick sort of anecdote. If you ever wonder how much of an entertainment value people are getting out of this very important debate, I actually appeared on Fox and Friends with Steve Doocy this year. And Steve Doocy had done a huge 10-minute piece a couple days before about how NASA scientists were lying about the climate change record, about how there was a temperature point for 1934, and they'd moved it. And this showed that they were lying about the long-term climate trend in the United States. And this was immediately, it was actually rated as pants on fire lie by an independent fact checker. Because what happened in 1934 is we recalibrated a number of weather stations, and they became more consistent as to what time of day they took weather measurements. And we also calibrated for the height difference, the altitude difference, which is something you in Boulder know about here up here at almost 6,000 feet. And I had all the facts, and I went on to the Steve Doocy show at their invitation. And before the cameras rolled, Steve Doocy was talking to me about this, about the facts, about the climate change data, about what had happened with this point. And I was being, just like I was to you, very friendly and non-confrontational, and saying, your money pays my salary. I am here to help. I'm here to clarify what the situation is. And Steve Doocy, the cameras rolled, we were on air. He gave me a very softball question about air quality and then got me off. He wouldn't even let me talk. So they're not interested in telling you what the facts are. They're interested in the entertainment, in the clicks, in the selling the ads on the, on the television shows. And, it's one of the things we have to decouple. What have you heard about climate change, and why are you skeptical about it? It's something we really have to delve into. Thank you.